Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So tonight we're going to talk about closing costs.
Well, what are closing costs and what does that have to do with real estate?
Closing costs are fees and charges that must be paid at the time of closing. Both the buyers and the sellers are required to pay
Different fees. And those fees are negotiable for the most part. When it's more of a buyer's market, the buyer will negotiate closing costs, such as asking the buyer to cover their side of the closing cost. Um, right now, it's a seller's market. Most houses are getting offers, 3 to 4 offers. Most of them are over asking. So if you go in and say, "Hey, I want to go in and ask, and can you cover my closing cost?" The seller's automatically not even going to look at your offer, and they're going to go to the next person. So they are negotiable. The seller might also say, "Hey, you're going to cover my closing costs," because they want to take more money once they close on the property.
So let's talk about closing costs for buyers.
The buyer tends to have a lot more closing costs than the seller does once you remove the realtor fees. Some of those fees are the loan origination fees. These are fees that your lender charges you to process the loan. Then there is the appraisal cost. Now, some banks and lenders will put the appraisal fees in with the closing cost. For ours, they actually take out that fee um, once the appraisal's ordered. For us, they usually take out $550 for the appraisal to be ordered, and then they usually refund $50 because it ends up being $500 each time for that appraisal. So we don't pay that during closing, but other banks will have that as a fee during closing. There's fees for title insurance. There's fees for the bank to run your credit score. And then there's different escrow fees that they have in there depending on what you negotiated into the contract. Then you have a proration of the property tax. So depending on if it's summer or winter taxes and when those entities are paid, you will pay a proration from the day that you close to whatever the day that taxes are due. And then the last one is origination or is points. So if you buy a $100,000 house, you have 4 points on there. That's going to be $1,000 per point. So that's going to be $4,000 that they're going to add to your closing cost. So at any point, closing costs can be anywhere between 2 to 5%. Once you start to add points in there, it can be significantly higher. So a $100,000 house, your closing cost is going to be anywhere from 2 to probably 6 to 7,000 once you start to get points involved into it. And now let's talk about the seller side of closing costs, which usually doesn't pertain to us because we buy and hold everything.
So when it comes to the closing costs for the seller, one of the biggest fees is commission for the agents. So in our area, it's roughly 6%, correct?
Yep, usually split 3 and 3.
So that is kind of the big one. And then with that also comes the title insurance and then the property tax transfer. And then with that also comes like any outstanding liens or judgments on the property, which he can talk a little bit more about that because
Yep.
I'm not great.
So it could be if you still have a mortgage or a note on the property that has to be paid off when the house sells. A lot of mortgages have a due on sale clause. Some people want to pay off other things so they can get with the title company and they could say they want to pay off different credit cards. They could pay off student loans. It could be a car note that they want to pay off. So whatever they want to go into that money to pay off. So instead of like the seller just taking a lump sum and then have to write all these checks out, you could actually have the title company do that for you. So it's one less thing that you have to stress about. So now let's wrap that up. You have your house under contract, you completed your inspection, you completed your appraisal, everything's done, you waive your inspection contingency, and now you're set to close. Your lender has to send you the seller's disclosure 3 days before closing, correct?
Correct.
And in that seller's disclosure, it will have a full breakdown of what your fees are, from your points to your origination fees to all your prorated taxes and everything else that kind of goes into it. So you will have that. It will go to the buyer. It will go to the buyer's agent. And then a separate one will go to the seller. It will go to the seller's agent. That way you have a chance to look through all those to make sure that everything is correct. And then once you actually go to closing, you will have those exact same documents that you will then obviously have to sign. but it gives you a chance to go over them 3 days prior, which means that once you receive that seller's disclosure, you have to wait a minimum of 3 business days before you can close.
Real quick, like where does the earnest deposit money come in during all this?
So the earnest money is basically prepaid closing cost. And I guess we forgot to go into like the closing cost. It also includes whatever your down payment is. So if it's 25% of $3,000, then you're also obviously going to have to pay that $25,000 plus your additional closing cost. So if you do a $2,000 earnest money, they're just going to subtract that from what you have to bring to closing. And how do we pay our closing cost?
So in the beginning, we wrote a check, but then
Which we found out that you're actually not supposed to write a personal check for that large, and the only reason they agreed to accept it is because we had a personal relationship with them, and we know the people at our title company because we had to use them beforehand.
Correct.
So that was a big mistake.
Yes.
It either needs to be a cashier's check or how do we pay ours?
Oh, we transfer it.
Yes, so we contact our bank and they do a wire transfer for us, so we don't even have to worry about this. It's all taken care of.
Yes.
So-
One of my favorite things.
Yep, and so each area, each title company, each bank has different fees that they have. I encourage people to shop around because just because someone gives you the best interest rate doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have the best fees. So those are other things you want to look into. If you have any other questions, please let us know. Like and subscribe to the channel.